The plasma cannon's heat still radiated from Marcus Chen's power armor as he stood before the towering crystal gates of the Velthari Palace. Smoke drifted from the battlefield behind him, where the twisted remains of war machines lay scattered, like broken toys. The acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone filled his nostrils through his helmet's filtration system. He had done it. Against impossible odds, he had single-handedly destroyed the siege engines that would have reduced this alien city to ash. The human soldier's chest plate bore deep gouges from energy claws. Sparks occasionally flickered from damaged circuitry along his arm guards. But he was alive, and so were the million innocent Velthari civilians behind these walls. Requesting audience with the High Council, Marcus spoke into his cum unit, his voice hoarse from 3 days of continuous combat. Human Diplomatic Corps, Representative Marcus Chen. Serial number. The crystal gates shimmered and dissolved into particles of light, revealing a vast courtyard filled with beings that looked like living starlight. The Velthari were beautiful in an otherworldly way, graceful figures with skin that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Their eyes like twin nebulae, shifting between colors that had no names in human language. But beauty, Marcus had learned, could be as cold as the void between stars at the center of the courtyard. On a throne that appeared to be carved from a single massive diamond sat High Counselor Zarathis. Her expression was unreadable as she watched the human approach, leaving muddy boot prints on the pristine crystal floor. "You dare enter our sacred space in that ... crude apparatus." The voice came from behind the throne, young musical, but dripping with disdain, Marcus turned to see Princess Liravel emerge from the shadows. She was younger than the others, perhaps equivalent to a human teenager, but her beauty was already breathtaking. Stars seemed to dance beneath her translucent skin, and her silver hair flowed like liquid mercury. Yet her expression held nothing but contempt as she looked at the battered human soldier. "Remove that barbaric shell immediately," she commanded, her voice echoing in the crystalline chamber. "Do you not know you stand before royalty?" Marcus felt his jaw clench behind his helmet's faceplate. He had just saved this city, possibly this entire world, and this was the thanks he received, but diplomacy was part of his mission. Earth needed this alliance, Your Highness, he said carefully. "My armor contains sensitive military equipment. Protocol requires protocol?" Princess Liravel laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Your crude human protocols mean nothing. Here, you are nothing but a savage in metal skin, playing at being civilized." The other Velthari in the courtyard began to murmur among themselves, their voices creating an ethereal harmony that somehow managed to sound mocking. Marcus felt heat rising in his chest, not from his armor's power core, but from something far more primal. Princess High Counselor Zarathis spoke softly, but her daughter continued as if she hadn't heard. "Look at it." Liravel gestured dismissively at Marcus. "Clumsy, crude, inferior. Its species still fights with projectiles and explosives, while we have mastered the very fabric of space and time. Why should we lower ourselves to acknowledge such ... primitiveness?" The words hit Marcus harder than any enemy weapon ever had. He had spent 15 years in service to humanity, had seen friends die in the cold vacuum of space, had sacrificed everything for the dream of peaceful coexistence between species. And this spoiled child, who had never known war or loss, dared to call him primitive? "You think my methods are crude?" Marcus's voice was deadly quiet now, amplified by his armor's speakers. "You think humanity is inferior?" "I know it is," Liravel replied with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Your entire species is nothing but violent animals who learn to use tools. You have no art, no culture, no understanding of the deeper mysteries of existence. You are beneath our notice." The courtyard fell silent except for the hum of Marcus's power armor. Through his helmet's display, he could see his vital signs, spiking heart rate, blood pressure, stress hormones. As AI companion's voice whispered in his ear, "Recommend diplomatic response. Mission parameters require." Marcus reached up and manually disabled his helmet's audio feed. High Counselor Zarathis leaned forward on her throne, something like concern flickering in her cosmic eyes. "Human soldier, my daughter speaks from ignorance. She is never no, Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying across the courtyard with unexpected authority. Let her speak. Let her show everyone exactly what she thinks of the primitive human who just saved her world. Princess Liravel's expression shifted from contempt to surprise, then back to arrogance. You saved nothing, crude one. We could have handled the crisis ourselves if we had chosen to act. Your intervention was unnecessary and unwelcome. Unnecessary? Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Those were Korthrak siege engines out there. They had already broken through your outer energy barriers. Your own defense forces were in full retreat. A temporary setback, the princess waved dismissively. We were merely analyzing the situation. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, seeing clearly for the first time. This wasn't ignorance, it was willful blindness. The kind of arrogance that got people killed in the void between stars. Slowly, deliberately. He reached up and began unfastening the seals on his helmet. The hiss of pressurization filled the silent courtyard as he lifted it off, revealing his scarred, weathered face. To the assembled aliens, "What are you doing?" Princess Liravel demanded, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. "You want to see the primitive savage beneath the armor?" Marcus set his helmet on the ground with infinite care. Fine, his hands moved to the chest. Plate release mechanisms. Heavy armor plates fell away one by one, each piece hitting the crystal floor with a resonant clang that echoed through the chamber. Underneath his body was a map of old wounds, plasma burns, projectile scars, the pale lines where battlefield medics had worked their desperate magic. "This is what your unnecessary salvation looks like," Marcus said as he stripped away the arm guards. These scars came from holding the line at Kepler Station while 10,000 civilians evacuated. This burn? He pointed to a twisted patch of skin on his shoulder. Proxima Centauri, when I held a hull breach shut with my bare hands so the ship's children could reach the escape pods. More armor fell away. The Velthari watched in fascination and growing horror as the true cost of Marcus's service was revealed. This. He indicated a deep furrow across his ribs, when I carried wounded through a methane fire for 6 hours. And this one. His finger traced a long scar down his left leg. Europa, when I walked 18 kilometers across the ice in a damaged suit to call for rescue. My leg was broken in 3 places, but 23 people went home to their families because I didn't stop walking. Princess Liravel had gone very quiet, starlight beneath her skin flickering uncertainly. Marcus's voice remained calm, almost conversational, as he continued dismantling his armor. "You say humanity has no art? Every one of these scars is a masterpiece, painted in sacrifice. No culture. Our culture is written in the bonds between people who would die for strangers. No understanding of deeper mysteries, laughed, but there was no humor in it. Child, I have stared into the face of entropy itself and chosen to build something beautiful in its shadow." The leg armor came away next, revealing more scars, more stories written in damaged flesh. "You think we're violent animals who learned to use tools?" Marcus straightened to his full height, standing now in just his basic undersuit. "You're right, we are. But do you know what makes us truly dangerous? It's not our weapons or our armor. It's that when someone threatens our pack, human or alien, friend or stranger, we will burn ourselves to ash before we let them fall." He gestured toward the battlefield beyond the walls, where smoke still rose from the destroyed siege engines. "Didn't come here as your superior or your equal, princess. I came here as what I've always been, a tool in the hands of those who need protection. But tools, you see, require respect. Not for their beauty or their sophistication, but for their purpose." Marcus began walking toward the gate, leaving his expensive military hardware scattered on the crystal floor like discarded toys. "Where are you going?" High Counselor Zarathus called after him, alarm clear in her voice. "Home," Marcus replied without turning around. "You don't need a primitive savage, after all. I'm sure your deeper understanding will serve you well when the Korthrak return with their main fleet." "Wait." Princess Liravel's voice cracked like breaking crystal. "You can't just leave. The treaty? The alliance?" Marcus paused at the threshold of the gate and looked back over his shoulder. For For the first time since entering the courtyard, he smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Alliance is a word that means partnership between equals, princess. You've made it very clear that's not what you want. He gestured at the armor he'd abandoned. Keep it. Consider it a gift from one savage to another. Because when the darkness comes for you and it will come, you'll learn that sometimes you need tools that are willing to break themselves to save you. This is madness. Lerville stepped forward, her composure finally cracking. You cannot simply abandon your post, your duty. My duty, Marcus said quietly, was to try to save your people. I did that. But my honor, the thing that makes me more than just a clever animal with tools that won't let me stay where I'm not wanted. He walked through the gate, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and the glitter of abandoned armor. The crystal barriers shimmered back into place behind him, sealing the Velthari safely in their beautiful, isolated world. But as Marcus Chen disappeared into the alien wilderness, carrying nothing but his wounds and his dignity, Princess Lyraville touched one of the discarded armor pieces with trembling fingers and wondered if she had just made the most catastrophic mistake in her people's history. The first of the Korthrock. Scout ships appeared on the horizon within the hour. Hashash Chapter 2. The reckoning approaches 3 days after the humans' departure. Princess Lyraville stood on the highest tower of the Crystal Palace, watching distant explosions light up the night sky. The outer settlements were falling one by one, their desperate distress calls filling the communication channels with static-laden pleas for help. Report, she commanded, though her voice lacked its usual imperious tone. Commander Vexthel, 1. Of the few Velthari who had actual combat experience, materialized beside her in a shower of light particles. His usually pristine, stellar-patterned skin was dim with exhaustion, and his cosmic eyes held depths of worry that made Lyraville's stomach twist. The Korthrak main fleet has arrived, he said without preamble. 200 vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts. They're not just raiding this time, Princess. You're here to conquer. Lyraville gripped the crystal railing until her knuckles went white. Tiny stars flickering erratically beneath her skin. Our defenses? Holding at 60% effectiveness. Vexthel replied grimly. But the siege engines the human destroyed were only the opening probe. The real assault hasn't even begun yet. Far below in the courtyard where Marcus had abandoned his armor, teams of Velthari scientists worked frantically to understand the alien technology. Human equipment remained stubbornly inert, its security systems locked by biometric scanners that would only respond to their departed owner. What about the planetary defense grid? Lyraville asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Functional but untested against this scale of assault. Your Highness? Vexthel hesitated, then pressed on. The High Council is requesting your presence in the war room. They want to know if there's any way to contact the human. Lyraville's laugh was bitter as space wind. Contact him? I called him a primitive savage and told him his intervention was unwelcome. Why would he answer our calls? Because, came a new voice from behind them. Despite what you said, he is not primitive. Not in the ways that matter. Both Velthari turned to see High Counselor Zarathis approaching, her star-filled robes rustling in the alien breeze. Ancient Leader's expression was grave, and the galaxy swirling beneath her skin seemed dimmer than usual. Mother Lyraville began, but Zarathis raised a hand for silence. I have been alive for 3,000 of your years, daughter. I have seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a cosmic shore. And in all that time, I have learned one immutable truth. It is not technology that makes a species great, nor beauty, nor even wisdom. It is the willingness to sacrifice oneself for others, even for those who do not deserve it. The explosions on the horizon grew brighter, closer. Somewhere out there, people were dying while their would-be savior walked, alone through the wilderness. The human displayed that quality in abundance, Zarathis continued. He came to us bloodied and exhausted, having fought alone against impossible odds to save our people. And how did we repay him? With contempt and dismissal. Lyraville felt tears, actual tears, not the crystalline droplets that Velthari usually shed, forming in her cosmic eyes. I was so sure of our superiority. Our technology, our culture, our understanding of the universe. How could crude matter-based beings compare to us? Technology without wisdom is meaningless, her mother replied softly. Culture without compassion is empty. Understanding without humility is the path to destruction. Commander Vexthal's communication device chimed urgently. He listened for a moment, then looked up with fear plain on his ethereal features. The Korthrak have begun their final approach, he reported. All outer defenses have fallen. They'll reach the capital in 6 hours. Evacuation status? Zarathis asked. The civilian transports can accommodate perhaps 20% of the population. The rest, he didn't need to finish. Liravel closed her cosmic eyes, seeing in her mind the image of Marcus Chen walking away, leaving his armor behind like a discarded promise. She remembered his scars, each one a story of sacrifice she had been too arrogant to understand. She remembered his words. When the darkness comes for you, and it will come, you'll learn that sometimes you need tools that are willing to break themselves to save you. The darkness was here. Their most powerful tool had walked away because of her pride. I have to find him, she said suddenly, turning toward the crystal gates. Daughter, no. Zarathis caught her arm. The wilderness is vast, and we don't even know which direction he went. The Korthrak patrol ships will kill me if they catch me, yes. Liravel gently but firmly removed her mother's hand. But millions will die if I don't try. I caused this, mother. My arrogance, my blindness. Have to make it right. Even if you find him, Commander Vexthal pointed out. Why would he return? You humiliated him before his allies and ours. His pride? His pride? Liravel laughed, but there was no humor in it. You still don't understand, do you? His pride isn't in being acknowledged or praised. His pride is in doing what's right, even when the cost is everything he has. She moved toward the gate, but paused to look back at her mother. If I don't return, tell our people the truth. Tell them that a primitive savage tried to save them, and they were too enlightened to accept his help.
Ow.
The crystal barriers dissolved at her approach, and Princess Liravel stepped out into the alien night, following the same path Marcus Chen had taken 3 days earlier. Behind her, the palace blazed with desperate activity as her people prepared for a war they couldn't win. The irony was not lost on her. The most advanced civilization in this sector of space, reduced to hoping that one scarred human would forgive them enough to bleed for them again. In the distance, Korthrak warships howled through the atmosphere like mechanical demons, and time began to run out for everyone. Chapter 3. The Savages. Returned Princess Liravel had been walking for 18 hours when she found Marcus Chen sitting beside a small fire in a grove of crystal trees, staring up at the alien constellations. His face was calm, almost peaceful, as if the weight of abandoned duty had been lifted from his shoulders. I was wondering when someone would come, he said without looking at her, his voice carrying easily across the clearing, though I expected. A soldier, not a princess. Liravel approached cautiously, acutely aware of how vulnerable she looked without her royal regalia. Her star-filled skin was dim with exhaustion, and her usually perfect appearance was marred by cuts from crystal. Thorns and dust from the long journey. The Korthrak fleet has arrived, she said simply. 200 ships. Our outer defenses have fallen. Marcus nodded, still not looking at her. I know. I can see the glow of the burning settlements from here. He gestured toward the horizon, where orange light painted the clouds. How long do you have? Hours, maybe less. Liravel moved closer to the fire, drawn by its simple warmth. Our evacuation ships can only carry a fraction of the population. That's unfortunate. Marcus's tone was conversational, as if they were discussing the weather rather than genocide. Your people have such beautiful cities. It will be a shame to see them turn to slag. Casual dismissal cut deeper than any blade. Liravel felt her composure crack, cosmic tears streaming down her cheeks like falling stars. Please, she whispered. I know I have no right to ask, but ... please. They're going to die. All of them. They were going to die 3 days ago, too, Marcus replied, finally turning to look at her. His eyes were tired but not unkind. I seem to recall being told that my intervention was unnecessary and unwelcome. I was wrong. The words tore from her throat like broken glass. I was arrogant and foolish and blind. I called you primitive because I was too scared to admit that you possessed something we'd lost long ago. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And what's that? The willingness to break yourself for others. Liravel knelt beside the fire, her royal dignity forgotten. I've been thinking about your scars, about the stories they tell. Each one represents people saved, lives preserved, hope maintained in the face of despair. What do I have to show? For my perfect skin? What have I sacrificed for anyone? She looked up at him, her cosmic eyes pleading. I came here not as a princess commanding a subject, but as someone begging for mercy. Not for myself. I deserve whatever judgment you pass. But for the millions who had no voice in my cruelty. Marcus studied her for a long moment, seeing past the ethereal beauty to the genuine anguish beneath. You walked 18 hours through hostile territory to find me. Why? Because you were right, she said simply. When you said that tools require respect, you weren't talking about your armor or weapons. You were talking about yourself. Every human who has ever stood between the darkness and the innocent. I disrespected not just you, but everything you represent. A distant rumble shook the ground, the sound of massive engines descending through atmosphere. Both of them looked toward the glow on the horizon, which was growing brighter by the minute. Even. If I wanted to help, Marcus said quietly, what could one human do against 200 ships? I don't know. Liravel's voice was barely a whisper. But I've learned something these past few days. It's not about the odds or the technology or the numbers. It's about the choice to stand up, when standing up is the only honorable thing to do. Marcus was quiet for so long that Liravel began. To think he would refuse. When he finally spoke, his voice was so soft she had to strain to hear it. My father was a miner on Europa, he said, staring into the fire. Dangerous work, terrible conditions, barely enough pay to feed his family. But every day he went down into those ice tunnels because people needed the minerals he extracted. He died in a cave-in when I was 12, saving 2 other miners who were trapped. He looked at her directly now, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. He taught me that honor isn't about recognition or reward. It's about doing what needs to be done regardless of the cost. And right now, what needs to be done is saving your people not because they deserve it, but because they're in danger and I have the power to help. Marcus stood, brushing dust from his simple clothes. There's just one problem. My armor's back in your palace, and I can't exactly take on a Korthrak dreadnought with harsh language. For the first time in days, Liravel smiled a radiant expression that made the stars beneath her skin dance with renewed vigor. About that armor, ... She reached into a fold of her travel cloak and produced a small crystal device. Marcus recognized it as a Velthari transportation beacon, technology far beyond human capability. You brought my armor here. I brought everything, Liravel said, activating the device. Every piece, every weapon, every system. I studied the maintenance logs while the technicians worked. I wanted to understand what you had sacrificed for us. The air shimmered, and Marcus's full combat gear materialized around them in neat, organized piles. But this wasn't the same equipment he had. Abandoned. The Velthari had upgraded it, integrating their crystalline energy systems with his human engineering. The armor now glowed with inner light, and the weapons hummed with barely contained power. We couldn't unlock your security systems, Liravel explained, but we could enhance what was already there. The power core is now tied to our planetary energy grid. The weapons can channel our stellar manipulation technology and the defensive systems. She gestured at the armor with something approaching. You'll be nearly invulnerable. Marcus ran his fingers over the transformed armor, feeling the alien enhancements beneath familiar surfaces. Because I realized something while I was upgrading your equipment, Liravel said. You called yourself a tool, but you're wrong. You're not a tool, you're an artist. And these? She indicated the weapons and armor. These are your brushes and canvas, I just made sure you had the finest materials to work with. Another rumble, closer this time. The Korthrak were running out of patience. Marcus began donning the enhanced armor, feeling the familiar weights settling into place. But this time was different. The equipment felt alive, responsive in ways it never had before. The helmet's display showed power readings that made his breath catch. With this kind of enhancement, he might actually have a chance. There's something else, Lyravul said, as he sealed the final connections. My mother, the High Counselor Shi, wants to speak with you, to apologize, and to offer something that might help in the battle ahead. What kind of something? Smile was mysterious, tinged with the kind of hope that comes from desperate circumstances, the kind that might turn a primitive savage into the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Marcus's enhanced helmet powered up, flooding his vision with tactical displays and threat assessments. The Korthrak fleet was visible now as red icons, on his screen, growing larger by the minute. Lead the way, Princess, he said, his voice amplified by speakers that now carried harmonics of stellar wind.
Ow.
Let's go save your world. As they ran toward the distant city, Princess Lyravul found herself thinking that she had never seen anything more beautiful than a scarred human in alien armor. Choosing to stand against impossible odds simply because it was the right thing to do, the darkness was coming. But for the first time in days, she believed they might actually have a chance to hold it back. Chapter 4. When savages rise, the Crystal Palace's war room hummed with desperate energy as Marcus Chen strode through. Its entrance, his enhanced armor casting patterns of light across the transparent walls. High Counselor Zarathus rose from her command throne, her ancient eyes wide with something that might have been hope. Human soldier, she said formally, I owe you an apology that spans the depth of space itself. Apologies later, Marcus replied, his tactical display already analyzing the defensive positions. Right now, I need information. Fleet composition, current positions, estimated time to bombardment. Commander Vextal stepped forward, projecting a holographic battle map into the center of the room. The display showed the full scope of the disaster 200 Korthrak vessels arranged in a perfect siege formation, 3 massive dreadnoughts anchoring the fleet's center. They've learned from our previous encounters, Vextal explained. Grimly, no single point of failure this time. The siege engines were just the opening move. They're planning to glass the entire planet from orbit. Marcus studied the formation, his enhanced helmet analyzing attack vectors and defensive possibilities. The integration of Velthari technology had given him processing power beyond anything he'd ever imagined. But even so, the tactical situation looked hopeless. What about your planetary defenses? He asked. Operational but insufficient, Zarathus replied. Our energy barriers can deflect perhaps 20% of their total firepower. The rest, ... she gestured helplessly. Evacuation progress? 18% of the population secured, Commander Vextal reported. At current rates, we might save 500,000 before the bombardment begins. 500,000 out of 50 million. Marcus felt the familiar cold weight settle in his chest, the same feeling he'd carried during every desperate last stand. Every impossible rescue, every moment when mathematics and reality conspired against hope. There is one possibility, High Counselor Zarathus said quietly, but it would require a sacrifice that no being should be asked to make. Marcus turned to her, and something in his posture made the entire room fall silent. I'm listening. Our planetary core is a crystallized star, she explained, containing energy beyond measure. If that energy could be released in a controlled manner, it could power a defense grid capable of destroying the entire Korthrak fleet in the uncontrolled manner. Would sterilize half the solar system, Zarathus admitted. The process requires someone to manually regulate the energy flow from inside the core chamber. The radiation levels... She paused, looking at this scarred human who had already given so much. Death would be inevitable, but it would take hours. Painful. Hours. Marcus nodded as if she had just described the weather. How do I get there? Marcus, no. Princess Lyravul stepped forward, her stellar skin bright with anguish. There has to be another way. We can't ask you to. You're not asking, Marcus interrupted gently. I'm volunteering. But why? She demanded, tears streaming down her face like liquid starlight. We treated you with contempt. We called you primitive, inferior. Why would you die for people who despised you? Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every choice that had brought him to this moment. Because that's what humans do, he said simply. We don't save people because they deserve it or because they appreciate it. We save them because they need saving. That's not primitive, princess. That's the most advanced thing any species can be. He turned to the tactical display, already planning the approach route to the planetary core. How long do I have once I start the process? The energy buildup will take approximately 6 hours to reach critical mass. Commander Vextel replied, his voice thick with emotion. The Korthrak fleet will be destroyed, but you will have 6 hours to think about every life I'm saving. Marcus finished. I've had worse ways to spend a day. The room erupted in protest, Velthari voices raised in harmony, arguing for alternatives, for other solutions. For anything that didn't require this ultimate sacrifice. But Marcus had already moved beyond debate, was checking his equipment, verifying system integrity, preparing foe, or what might be his final mission. There's something else, he said, cutting through the arguments, something I need from all of you. The protests died down, replaced by expectant silence. I need you to remember this, Marcus continued, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Not as a story of human heroism or alien redemption. Remember it as proof that when people choose to stand together, regardless of species, culture, or past mistakes, they can face any darkness. He walked over to Princess Lyraville, who was crying openly now, her perfect composure finally shattered completely. You asked me once what makes humans dangerous, he said softly. It's not our weapons or our courage. It's that we believe, truly. Believe that every life has value. So even when that belief costs us everything. Marcus reached up and removed his helmet, revealing his scarred, weathered face one final time. Your people aren't primitive or advanced, princess. They're just people. And people deserve to live. He handed her the helmet, then turned to address the entire room. I have one request. When this is over, when your children are safe, and your cities are rebuilt, remember that the galaxy is full of species who think they're superior to everyone else. Don't be one of them. The universe is big enough for all of us to be different and still be valuable. Alarms began blaring throughout the palace proximity warnings as the Korthrak fleet moved into bombardment position. Walls, they could see the first wave of attack ships beginning their descent. Time to go, Marcus said, replacing his helmet and sealing his armor. The enhanced systems came online with a harmony of alien and human technology, ready for their final symphony. Wait, High Counselor Zarathis called out. There must be something we can do for you, some comfort we can provide. Marcus paused. At the chamber entrance, looking back at the assembled Velthari, these beautiful, possible beings who had become something precious to him despite everything. Actually, there is one thing, he said. Could someone sing for me? During the final hours, I mean. Something beautiful. I've always thought it would be nice to die listening to something beautiful. Princess Lyraville stepped forward, her voice breaking as she spoke. I will sing for you, Marcus Chen. I will sing the song of eternal stars, the most sacred melody of our people. And every Velthari in the galaxy will join their voice to mine, so that you know you do not face darkness alone. Marcus smiled, the first truly happy expression he'd worn since arriving on this world. Thank you, he said simply. That sounds perfect. As he walked toward the core chambers, the first Korthrak bombardment began. Energy beams lancing down from orbit to test the planetary defenses. The war had begun in earnest, but for the first time since the crisis started, the defenders had hope, because sometimes when the darkness comes calling, the galaxy sends someone willing to burn themselves to ash rather than let innocent people fall. And sometimes, that's enough to light the way to tomorrow. #. Epilogue, the song that echoes still 6. Months after the Battle of Valtharosas, the historians would eventually name it Princess, Liravel stood in the newly constructed memorial of the Eternal Flame, watching human children play among the crystal gardens that had grown around Marcus. Chen's tomb. The memorial was unlike anything the Velthari had ever built before. Instead of the soaring, ethereal architecture they typically favored, this was something more grounded, more solid. It was built from both human steel and Velthari crystal, a fusion of technologies and aesthetics that shouldn't have worked but somehow created something more beautiful than either species could have achieved alone. At the center of the memorial burned an actual flame, not the energy constructs the Velthari usually preferred, but fire sustained by natural combustion. It was a human touch that Marcus would have appreciated, Liravel thought. Simple, primitive, and absolutely essential. "The delegation from Earth has arrived, Your Highness, Commander," Vexthal announced. Approaching through the garden paths, he wore a new uniform, now one that incorporated both Velthari starlight patterns and human military insignia. The Joint Defense Force had been his idea, and it was proving remarkably effective. Liravel nodded but didn't immediately move. She was watching a young human girl, maybe 8 years old, explain something excitedly to a group of Velthari children. The human child was showing them a simple paper airplane, demonstrating how it flew through the air with nothing but folded material and thrown force. The Velthari children were fascinated, trying to replicate the design with their natural ability to manipulate matter at the molecular level. But their versions, perfect in every technical detail, somehow lacked the graceful unpredictability of the human girl's crude paper construction. "Primitive technology," Liravel murmured, but she was smiling as she said it. "I'm sorry, Your Highness." "Nothing, Commander, just remembering something a friend taught me." The human delegation was impressive admirals and ambassadors, scientists and soldiers. They had come to formalize the alliance that Marcus's sacrifice had made possible. To sign treaties and establish protocols for mutual defense, it was important work, the kind of diplomacy that would shape the future of both species. But Liravel found herself more interested in the children and their paper airplanes. "Your Highness," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen, approaching Marcus's sister, as it turned out. The family resemblance was striking, though Sarah carried her scars differently. Where Marcus had worn his wounds like medals of honor, Sarah bore hers like tools of the trade. "Admiral Chen," Liravel replied formally, though warmth crept into her voice. Over the past months, she had come to know the Admiral well during the joint military planning sessions. Sarah was every bit as stubborn as her brother, but with a politician's gift for making enemies feel like they were doing her favors. "I wanted to thank you," Sarah said, "for what you've done here." Marcus would have loved this memorial, but more than that, he would have loved what it represents. She gestured toward the playing children, toward the joint military patrols walking the crystal paths, toward the human technicians working alongside Velthari engineers to repair the last of the battle damage. "Integration, not domination," Sarah continued. "Cooperation, not conquest. That was always his dream." "It was his gift to us," Liravel replied softly, "though I'm not sure we deserved it." "Deserving was never the point," Sarah said, echoing words her brother might have spoken. "Marcus used to say that the universe doesn't run on merit, it runs on choice. Every day, every being in the galaxy chooses whether to build something or tear it down. He chose to build even when it cost him everything." The two women stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that both species found beautiful. In the distance, the first ships of the joint patrol fleet were returning from their exercises, leak Velthari vessels, flying in formation with bulky human cruisers. Their different design philosophies somehow creating a more effective fighting force than either could have achieved alone. "There's something else," Sarah said eventually. "Something I think you should know about those final hours." Liravel felt her breath catch. The official records of Marcus's last 6 hours in the planetary core were classified at the highest. Levels too sensitive for public consumption, too painful for those who had known him. She had never asked Sarah what her brother's final messages contained. "He wasn't alone," Sarah continued. "Not really. The entire time he was talking to the technicians monitoring his progress, to the evacuation teams, to anyone who would listen. He told jokes. He sang songs. He asked about people's families." Sarah's voice grew thick with emotion, In his final hour, when the radiation levels were becoming critical, he'd spent 47 minutes talking a young engineer through a panic attack. The kid was scared about the battle, about losing his family, about everything. And my brother, dying by degrees in a chamber full of lethal energies, pent his last strength convincing a stranger that tomorrow was worth fighting for. Tears were flowing freely down Liravel's face now, liquid starlight that caught the memorial flame's glow. That's who he was, Sarah finished. That's who humanity can be when we choose to be our best selves. And that's the legacy he left for both our species. Admiral Liravel said quietly, "There's something I need to tell you, something I've never admitted to anyone." Sarah waited patiently, recognizing the weight of confession in the princess's voice. In those final hours, when I sang for him, when our entire species joined their voices to Minya, felt something I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be part of something larger than myself, not as a ruler or a subject, but as one voice in a harmony that could span the stars. She looked directly at Sarah now, her cosmic eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your brother didn't just save our lives, Admiral. He taught us how to live." The memorial flame flickered in the evening breeze, casting dancing shadows across the gathered children, human and Valthari alike, learning to play together, learning to build something beautiful from the ashes of old prejudices. "There's one more thing," Sarah said, reaching into her uniform jacket. "Marcus left something for you specifically, recorded it during his final hour when he knew the process was irreversible." She handed Liravel a small device, human technology, but modified with Valthari crystals to store the message in both audio and harmonic frequencies. "He said to give this to you when you were ready to hear it. I think that time is now." Liravel took the device with trembling hands, feeling its weight like a sacred relic. "What does it say?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "It's encrypted to your biometrics only. But knowing my brother..." She smiled, and for a moment the family resemblance was overwhelming. "I suspect it's something that will make you laugh and cry at the same time." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Admiral Chen excused herself to attend the formal, diplomatic ceremonies, but Princess Liravel remained in the memorial garden, holding Marcus's final message and watching human children teach. Valthari children, the ancient art of making paper airplanes. She would listen to the message eventually. She knew. But for now, it was enough to sit in this place of peace and remember the scarred human soldier who had taught an entire civilization. The difference between being advanced and being civilized. The memorial flame burned steadily through the night, tended by volunteers from both species who had taken it upon themselves to ensure it never went out. They called themselves the Keepers of the Flame, and their membership included everyone from high-ranking officials to street sweepers. Anyone who believed that some lights were too important to let die in the months and years that followed. As the human-Valthari alliance grew into something that neither species had imagined possible, historians would debate the exact moment when two civilizations became one. Some would point to the formal treaty signings, others to the first joint military victories against the Korthrak expansion, but Princess Liravel knew the truth. The real moment of unity had come 6 hours after Marcus Chin sealed himself in the planetary core, when 50 million voices, human and Valthari alike, had joined together in the Song of Eternal Stars, singing for a dying soldier who had never asked for thanks and never expected to be remembered. The song had ended when Marcus's vital signs finally stopped, but its echo would continue for generations. A reminder that sometimes the most primitive thing a civilization can do ceasing to care for strangers is also the most advanced, and in the crystal gardens of the Memorial of the Eternal Flame, paper airplanes continued to fly on their simple, imperfect trajectories, carrying the dreams of children who would never know a galaxy where humans and Valthari were anything other than family. The flame burned on, tended by loving hands, a beacon of hope in a universe that had learned the most important lesson of all, that the best way to honor a sacrifice is not with monuments or ceremonies, but by becoming worthy of the gift that was given. Marcus Chen had walked away from those who ridiculed him, not in anger, but in sorrow. He had returned not for glory or recognition, but because people needed saving, and he had the power to save them. And in the end, that simple, primitive, thoroughly human choice had changed everything. The young alien princess had ridiculed the human soldier, and he had taken off his armor and walked away. But when he returned, he brought with him something far more powerful than any weapon: the unshakable belief that every life, no matter how different, how proud, or how foolish, had infinite worth. It was a lesson that would echo through the ages, carried forward by every child who learned to fold paper into wings, by every soldier who chose mercy over vengeance, by every being who looked at a stranger and saw not an enemy, but a cousin beneath the vast, welcoming stars. The savage had returned, and in doing so, had taught the galaxy what it truly meant to be civilized.